They haven't changed enough. It's actually 22 years since the Macpherson report, and I'm on the Home Affairs Select Committee, and we've just done a report on that. And what we found is that in relation to race and policing, things haven't moved far enough at all, and that the Black and minority communities have less confidence in the police than the white community. And that's very sad and regrettable. And there's more to be done in recruiting Black and minority police officers. And you've still got issues like stop and search, which was part of what helped to poison relationships between the police and the Black community even 10 years ago. But the truth is, even now, Black people are 9.5 times more likely to be stopped and searched by the police than white people. So things haven't moved as they should have done.
So given particularly the problems with stop and search and as you were pointing out, perhaps recruitment into the police, role models and so on, what policies would you like to see put in place to turn that tide?
What the Home Affairs Select Committee is calling for is for the Home Secretary to chair a special committee to look at race and policing, to have a race commissioner to drive change within the Met and the Home Office generally, and also to set targets for recruitment. Because where local police forces have done that, they've had some success. The Home Office and the Metropolitan Police specifically have to be a lot more proactive. They have to do more than pay lip service to race equality. They need to take some concrete action.
And thinking about the last 18 months specifically and the pandemic, and obviously we saw Black Lives Matter marches and so on, but some people believing that the pandemic in some ways not only locked us down, but locked down a lot of discussion about those issues, and that perhaps as we come out of lockdown, these issues might come to the forefront again.
One of the striking things about COVID and the lockdown is that when we're in lockdown, we also had some of the highest levels of stop and search of Black people on the street that we've seen in London. And that was extraordinary. You had fewer people on the street, but more people being stopped and searched. And we definitely need to have a debate about why this is. I think part of the problem is that the leadership of the Metropolitan Police certainly is very defensive about this, rather than taking up some of the practical suggestions that people have been making over 10 years to improve issues.
But if we're talking specifically about the Met, as you brought them up, do you still believe that there is racism in the Met?
We only have to look at the outturns, whether it's recruitment, the fact that the numbers of Black and minority police officers are far below their numbers in the community in London, and whether it's outturns like stop and search, 9.5 times more likely. Black people are 9.5 times more likely to be stopped and searched than white people. That points to an institution which has a very problematic record in relation to race.
But the Metropolitan Police would say that when they stop and search, they are trying to save lives, and that Black victims of violence or murder are many times higher than white. And that's one of the main reasons why Black people are stopped and searched more.
the, the what the stats tell us is the thing you're most likely to find when you stop and search people on the street are small quantities of cannabis for personal use. The other thing the stats show is that although Black people are less likely to take drugs than white people, we're more likely to be stopped and searched for drugs. The other thing the stats show is I think it's something like 16% of the stops find people with any type of weapon. This pretext that they're doing it to save lives does not equate with what the figures tell us about what stop and search is actually doing and what the results are that it's actually producing.
And Diane, can I ask you about your own experiences of racism? How has that changed over the last 10 years?
Well, I mean, I'm a politician, and race is something which politicians have always debated. I think there's perhaps been heightened debate after the death of George Floyd. But, race has been an issue in politics all along. I suppose the main thing I would say is that there are more black MPs than there were when I first started in politics.
And so has that made a difference to the level of racist abuse you yourself have been at the receiving end of?
No, if anything, the amount of racist abuse I get is higher than ever. But that's because of the rise of online. When I first became a member of parliament, you didn't have Twitter and these online media, whereas now you do. And as I say, I think the level of online abuse I get is worse than ever. And it's out there, people that want to abuse people of colour. Look what happened to those poor footballers after the Euro 2020 finals. Terrible levels of abuse. I mean, it's out there, sadly.
And as somebody who gets racist abuse online, particularly on Twitter, as you said, or other platforms, what should be done about that? For instance, would you agree that anonymous tweeters should have to lose their anonymity?
Well, I think you should be allowed to tweet anonymously, when you actually put the tweet online. But I think the media companies, be it Facebook, be it Twitter, they should have your actual name and address. So you don't have to tweet publicly using your real name and address, but the platform you tweet on, like Twitter, has to have your name and address. So if you tweet something which is abusive, racist, sexist, homophobic, the police can find you and take the necessary action. What I've found is it's very hard to track down people tweeting this stuff. So yes, you should have anonymity. You should have anonymity publicly, but the media platform should have your name and address so that you can be investigated, if necessary, prosecuted.
And given that the amount of racist abuse you have received online has increased, do you therefore think we are a more racist nation, or do you just think that's because there's the opportunity?
Oh, I think it's about the rise of online and the rise of access to online and the use of online. I think that younger people, and I don't want to generalize, but I think younger people are much more conscious about issues around race and much more thoughtful than they have been in the past. But because of the rise of Twitter and online generally, there is just more racist abuse about.
Diane, just finally, we're reflecting on 10 years on from the shooting and killing of Mark Duggan. Looking forward 10 years, what's your best case scenario and worst case scenario on race relations in this country?
I like to think that we can move forward a little faster than we have done. The Met Police is one example. It would be good to increase the recruitment of black and minority police officers. It would be good to bring down this disproportionate level of stop and search. It would be good to bear down on institutional racism across the board, really. And I like to think that is what's going to happen.
And what role will you play in that?
Well, the role I've always played. I try and be a voice for people who don't otherwise have a voice. I try and stand up I try and stand up for my own constituents and for people more widely on these issues of fairness and racial justice.
Diane Abbott, thank you very much.
Thank you.